Good evening and welcome to the Planning Board meeting for the City of Lowell. Today's date, April 2nd, 2012. Tonight we have two public hearings, some new business, and we do have minutes from previously advertised meetings that we've had. At this point in time, I would request that we hold off on the minutes. I do have a couple of changes on those, and I think basically they're ministerial, and I know some of the other board members had some comments, so I'd make a motion at this time that we hold off on the minutes until after the public hearing is concluded.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I do know we have two public hearings in regards to Perkins Street. One is for 39 and one is for 65 Perkins Street. And the other one is for 1 Perkins Street as well. If there's no objection, council, if you want to combine those together, because I'm sure some of the questions that may come up for parking, or landscaping, or traffic, might be duplicate instead of doing them both together, if there's no objections. So when you do the narrative, we can keep them together? Okay. Okay. So what I will do is I will read both public hearing notices, and then we'll start from there if there's no objections. Okay? So the first matter is a site plan review and a special permit for 39 and 65 Perkins Street. This was continued from our last meeting due to the fact that we didn't have the proper notice posted outside of City Hall. We know that's been cured at this point in time, so we're good to roll tonight. The Lowell Planning Board will hold a public hearing to hear all interested persons relative to an application by Riverfront Development, LLC, care of EA Fish Development. The existing parcel at 39 Perkins Street contains 4 single and multi-story masonry structures located in 35,401 square feet of land. The existing parcel at 65 Perkins Street contains a 6,000 square foot single-story brick building located on 12,751 square feet of land. The proposal includes the redevelopment of the structures of 39 Perkins Street in creation of 2 new structures to create 30 dwelling units and 1 3,400 square foot retail space. There are 6 dwelling units proposed for 35 Perkins Street. For 39 Perkins Street, 38 parking spaces will be provided off of Lawrence Drive, and 3 parking spaces will be provided off of Perkins Street, and 23 parking spaces will be located in the private parking garage on Perkins Street. For 65 Perkins Street, 6 parking spaces will be located off the Lawrence Drive, and 6 spaces will be provided in the private parking garage on Perkins Street. The applicant is seeking site plan review under section 11.4 and special permit approval under Article 12, Table of Uses of the City of Lowell zoning ordinance. The parcel is located in institutional zoning district. We also have for the public hearing is site plan review on 1 Perkins Street, and that matter was continued also for the lack of proper notice not being posted at City Hall at our last meeting, which has been cured. The Lowell Planning Board will hold a public hearing to hear all interested persons relative to an application by 1 Perkins Street, LLC, care of Myra Development, LLC. The existing parcel contains 4,378 square feet of land and 1 vacant 3-story building with a footprint of approximately 2,000 square feet. The proposal includes the redevelopment of the vacant building onto 6,000 square feet of commercial space and creation of 6 parking spaces. 9 additional spaces will be located in the private parking garage on Perkins Street. The applicant is seeking site plan review under section 11.4 of the Lowell zoning code. The parcel is located in an institutional zoning district. May we hear the case for the applicant, please?
For the record, Mr. Chairman, James Flood, 549 Rogers Street, Lowell, representing the applicant 1 Perkins LLC. 1 Perkins LLC is presently the owner of the property at 1 Perkins Street, and they have a purchase and sale agreement with Riverfront Development for 39 and 65 Perkins Street. With me tonight is Ed Walsh of 1 Perkins, Barry Gannick, who is our architect, and also Matt Middlestat from Riverfront Development. As the notices state, we have 3 requests tonight. One is for site plan approval for 1 Perkins Street, site plan approval and Article 12 special permit for 39 and 65 Perkins Street. I'm going to try to give an overview of the project, then turn it over to the architect, and then if we can go over the comments later, Mr. Chairman, is that how you want to do it?
It's fine.
Okay. 1 Perkins Street, and it's our proposal to renovate and redevelop the former administration building for Lawrence Mills into commercial space. It will consist of approximately 6,000 square feet of commercial use. The building is of historic significance because it was part of the original Lawrence Mills complex and is also subject to historic approval. And I think it's on, I think I saw an email, it's on in a couple of weeks, I guess, in front of the Historic Board. As to the proposed use of the property, they're not sure yet. They have been negotiating with prospective tenants. Nothing has been finalized. The interior of the building will be designed based on whatever the prospective tenant wants there. Parking, there's going to be a little change in the parking because we originally had spaces for 5 in the back, but because we had to locate a dumpster, we're going to lose one of those spaces, and we're going to pick up another one in the parking garage. So based on 6,000 square feet, we need 15 spaces. And Barry will show the new parking plan on the plans that he's got tonight. And the plan will provide for 4 spaces in the rear of the building, plus the dumpster. The remaining spaces will be provided by lease in the parking garage, which 1 Perkins constructed as part of the hub hosiery development that was done a couple of years ago. So they control that parking garage. Landscaping, there isn't much area on the site to be landscaping, but my client is willing to work with DPD and Lowell Historic Board staff regarding the design. Access to this part of the project would be by way of Lawrence Drive. They'd have to get down in the back to park, and there is a pedestrian bridge leading from Perkins Street into the building. Trash removal, we have provided on the new plans for a dumpster, and it will be fenced in and gated in accordance with City of Lowell zoning requirements. Utilities, water, sewer, and gas are available on the site. The electrical will be brought from a pole on Perkins Street into the site. And snow removal will be provided by the on-site maintenance people we have for the 2 buildings next door. It will be removed from site if necessary, but there seems to be enough on the side to plow those 4 spaces. So, as to 39 and 65 Perkins Street, we require site plan approval and an Article 12 special permit. The parcels are also shown as lots 2A, which is 35 Perkins Street, and lots 2B, 65 Perkins Street, on a plan that's recorded at the registry in Plan Book 229, Plan 91, which I don't know whether, did they get a copy of that? I don't know whether you got a copy of that. But existing condition, parcel 2A consists of 4 existing structures on approximately 35,400 square feet of land. Parcels have a Perkins Street address, but are also accessed by Lawrence Drive. As with the administration building, any development of this parcel is also subject to historic approval. The buildings as they exist today are located along Lawrence Drive. The proposed plan is to renovate and develop the buildings into 18 new residential units. In addition, we're proposing a new 2-story building of 12 units along Perkins Street. Parcel 2A will have 30 new residential units. Also proposing a new commercial building at the corner of Lawrence Drive and Perkins Street, which is approximately 3,400 square feet in size. Parcel 2B is an existing 1-story brick structure consisting of approximately 6,000 square feet on a lot of approximately 12,751 square feet. The building is located off Lawrence Drive. Proposal is to develop this existing building into 6 residential units. As to parking, the proposed residential units require 2 spaces per unit or 60 spaces. The proposed commercial development of 3,400 square feet requires 4 additional spaces. According to the site plan, because we had to take 2 of those spaces for a dumpster, 42 spaces will be located in the back along Lawrence Drive, and we will provide 3 new spaces next to the commercial building on Perkins Street. As to the existing brick building on parcel 2A, we propose to use, well, as to the building on 2A, 36 spaces along Lawrence Drive and the 3 new spaces. The remaining spaces will be provided in the parking garage. Parcel 2B, we require 12 spaces for the 6 units. 6 of these spaces will be along Lawrence Drive, and the remaining will be in the parking garage. Access for the development of the existing buildings on 2A and 2B will be by Lawrence Drive. Access to the commercial building and new building on Perkins Street will be by Perkins Street. As to landscaping, once again, we'll be glad to work with DPD staff and the Historic Board in proposing a landscaping plan. As to utilities, all required utilities are on site. Snow removal, my client's maintenance staff will remove on the back of Lawrence Drive, and that snow will be removed from site. And on the new plan that Barry will show tonight, we have provided for a dumpster on 2 of the parking spaces along Lawrence Drive. As this board is probably aware, this portion of the development is the last remaining part of the riverfront development to be completed. Everything else has been done. We've worked closely with DPD staff, the Lowell Historic Board, with the National Park Service, and with state government in coming up with this plan. In our opinion, the project is designed to conform with the City of Lowell master plan and conforms with the neighborhood character in that area. And like I said, the completion will result in the finish of that whole Lawrence Mills development. So I'd like to turn it over to Barry to, just one other thing I wanted to point out. There's a question about parking in the garage. There are 100 spaces left in that garage that have not been used, so there's plenty of parking in there. Plus, I do have a letter from Chuck Carney that I could submit that says if they're short, he will provide additional parking in the city garage, so.
Mr. Flood, before you leave the mic, who else uses that garage now?
The 2 apartment buildings that Mr. Walsh's company owns.
And how many, do you know how many spaces total in the garage?
278,
Yeah, 370 total in Walsh was actually their development, Perkins Place and 1 Perkins.
Would you say 370?
The garage is designed for 370. That the Perkins Place Mills, the loft of Perkins Place is running actually 98% occupied. And we're using about 240 spaces, between 225 and 240, depending on the month. So we do have capacity.
You're using 245 to 2, but there must be a certain number committed, though.
No, that these spaces are actually the first come, first serve. So the apartment building is actually just about occupied.
Oh, okay. I thought, though, that the apartment building required a commitment of a certain number of parking spaces in the garage.
There is a license agreement in place so that we have to provide up to 368 spaces. But the apartment building is right now actually fully occupied, and we still have ample spaces.
Okay.
We're on that. Is that garage, can that be built up? Is that structure?
It can be, yes. So the garage was actually designed, sir, to be able to expand actually vertically and also laterally.
Okay, I thought so.
And this is pretty typical what we see with a apartment building of this complex. They use about 1.2 to 1.4 spaces per unit.
So I had another question. Mr. Flood, you mentioned that the code required 2 spaces per unit, but as I read it, it says 2.2. Am I reading it wrong? It says 0.75 per bedroom or 2.2 spaces per dwelling unit, whichever is greater.
I thought it was 2.
Okay, what am I reading then? Joe? Is it Joe? Craig, sorry.
I believe
Craig.
that's actually the provision for private dormitory. If you give me one moment, I'll double check that.
So we're using the provision for private dormitory?
No, the 7.75 spaces per bedroom is the updated requirement for private dormitories, but that doesn't apply to 7 or more unit redevelopments in the institutional district.
Okay, I'm looking at table 6, on 6.1.4, table parking requirements, residential uses, townhouse development including 7 or more units. It says 0.75 spaces per bedroom or 2.2 spaces per dwelling unit.
It's not a townhouse. I don't have it in front of me, but is it?
Yeah, we're actually at the, it is the same standard, actually. It's above it at standard D, multifamily dwelling including 7 or more units. So it's 1 space per dwelling unit in the DMU, or in all other units, it's 7.75 spaces per
Okay.
bedroom, or 2 spaces per dwelling unit, whichever is greater.
Okay, so we're using the multifamily dwelling including 7 or more units. Okay, thanks.
Good evening, Barry Gannick, Gannick Architects, One River Road, Carlisle, Mass. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the design changes we are making to the properties. 1 Perkins Street is the former admin building, and if I can get to that. Almost there. Which is right here, well, too far. So there, whoop. I apologize, this is a very tight ring here. There we go. The building will remain intact on the exterior. All changes will be internal. We will, you can see in the plan in the lower left, we will add a new stair and elevator if required by the tenant. The exterior will just be coordinated with the requirements of the historic board to rehab in a similar manner to the McQuaid building and the Hub Hosiery building that we did in the past. And I will go to the site plan. It's hard to see in the bottom right on the plan. You can see the building and the dumpsters in the upper left to the footprint. And just the remaining 3 spaces, parking spaces behind that. And while we're here, in the upper plan, you can see in the right edge of the upper plan are 2 dumpsters located. Okay. And that's what we're showing for all the new construction at the moment. And let me go to 65. This building is the existing 1-story building behind Hub Hosiery and McQuaid buildings, be converted into 6 units. Again, we will be restoring openings and the building, the masonry per discussions and agreements with the historic board. They were all flats, all single-story. New windows to match old historic profiles. On parcel 2A, which is a collection of renovated structures and new construction. Come on. Here we go. Almost. Well, here we go. In the axonometric drawing, you can see it's a view from Perkins Street. The new construction along the street, right next to the tower on the existing building, are 12 units. stacked, that's all new construction. On the corner is a new commercial building, the exact form and design to be defined, hopefully upon site plan approval. We will be able to understand the tenant use at that time and design it and finalize design on it. The buildings behind that are currently literally ruins that we will be resurrecting, restoring, putting roofs back on them, new windows to match historic profiles again, all in discussion with the Historic Commission Board. The materials on the new construction will not be brick. The Historic Commission has asked that we not do that to replicate historic structures in any way. We're thinking of more industrial materials, metal panels for exterior finish, roll roofing, similar to what the existing structures will have. And windows will not be small, light windows. They will not be similar to the old historic windows. And the space between the two buildings, if I can get to a plan. If you can see the space between the upper restored structures along Lawrence Drive and the buildings on facing Perkins Street will be a landscaped common area, and that, again, we will be working with DPW in the city. Okay, thank you.
Anything else on behalf of the applicant?
No, I don't, did you want to go through the comments? You want to wait on those, Tom?
Sure, if you want to address the comments, that'd be fine.
Yeah, I mean, I have,
We have one set for March 14th from Plan Development.
yep,
You want to start with those? Those seem to be
Sure.
both in depth, if you don't mind.
sure. You start with 1 Perkins Street.
Okay, thank you.
First one had to do with the dumpster, and I think we provided those spots, one on 1 Perkins Street, one of the parking spaces behind the building. The second one, there was a question, Craig wanted to know whether we would, about the parking behind 2A and 2-4, which is the line of, I think there's 44 spaces there. Whether that could be used for short-term or what our intentions were. Our intentions would be that the residents could use it during the evening, but during the day it would be available for short-term parking for the commercial property. It's a small commercial use, and we do have the 3 spaces beside it, which we feel is sufficient, but I don't think anyone will be using those spaces during the day. So they would be available during the day. There was a question about the internal configuration of the admin building. I think at one point in time there was talk about an outside staircase or an outside elevator. Everything is going to be inside now, so there's nothing that's going to be on the outside. Landscaping along the area along the canal. We have no problem working with staff. We don't feel, however, that a sycamore tree is a proper tree to put in there, but we will work and come up with some sort of a tree planting that everybody is happy with. 5, exterior lighting and signage will be used for the commercial space. We intend to have it, but I think that's all, once again, subject Signage, we don't know who's going to be in there yet. Any signage we put up there will conform with City of Lowell zoning. As to lighting, I think the historic is going to have some say about it, but we will be sensitive as to the lighting. As to parking, we intend to enter into similar agreements as we did with the two rental properties. And if there isn't sufficient parking in the garage that One Perkins constructed, then we do have the letter from Chuck County, and we'll enter an agreement with the City of Lowell for the required spaces. I think what we need is 35 spaces, and I think Chuck's letter says there's 50 there, so. As far as roof leaders are concerned, we will put roof leaders on the new construction, but because of the historic significance of the others, in the way they were constructed, it's impossible to do. So we can't do it on the ones that we're redeveloping. We have no problems with number 8 regarding straw wattles or compost sleeves. We have no problem with that, and we know we have to appear in front of the Conservation Commission. All the buildings will be sprinkled, so there's no problem with that. And the issue of frontage, I think Craig will say it has been resolved, so there's no problem with that. Lisa had some comments, and I'm going to have Eddie address those when we get to them, and that would take, because he's the engineer, I'm not. Then there was the issue on the whether those parking spaces along 2A and 2B were included in the original variance granted to the condos, and I think you've got an opinion from Eric Slagle that they weren't, and they were separate, and it was always meant to be parking for these two lots. As to flush curbing, no problem putting a concrete strip down the side so we can identify where those parking spaces are. I think on the new plan, we've reduced the curb cut to 32 feet. And I think, that's on the plan? It's on the plan that we've reduced it down to 32 feet, so it conforms. And we will provide the details of the curb ramps and the crosswalks regarding the three spaces beside the commercial building. Once again, as to plantings, we'll be glad to work with staff. As to the raceway, we intend to put the same type of fence in that we did on the apartment buildings, which will show the raceway. It's a fence that's existing now. Craig mentioned that the small portion of land between 2A and the hub hosiery building. Now, we have no problem constructing a walkway through that area, which is probably better than what you already have. There is a passageway through the hub hosiery building, but it closes at 6 o'clock. So if it's the board's wish that we do this, then we'd ask that you release us from the obligation to keep the hub hosiery passageway open, because that does close at 6 o'clock at night. As to D, on the parking spaces, I think there was a question whether we wanted to provide access down to the courtyard, but Mr. Walsh tells me that the grade is so high, so steep that it's very difficult to do, so we have no intention of doing that. And then I'm going to let him handle the sewer issues, because I think he knows more about it than I do, so. But, do you have Lisa's comments? Yeah. All right, I'm going to have Eddie handle the other stuff.
Mr. Jim, thank you. And these are the comments that came from engineering on the 19th. And Jim did actually touch on a few of these on the memo that came out on the 14th. To go back and contact the engineering office, to be contacted for all site inspections, that's fine. The plans will be drawn to the City of Lowell datum, that's fine. As built to be submitted both in electronic format in 90 days after issuance, that's fine. And that the city ordinance states that the owner is responsible for the connections all the way to the main, which is fine. And if we had to adjust any manholes, that we would use brick, which is, in fact, there actually are no new manholes, and we don't even have to adjust any manholes. The driveway permit, fine. Trench permit, fine. The pre-construction meetings, fine. That's pretty standard. And then the hours of work, 7A to 4P, 7A to noontime on Saturday. Again, these are the same requirements we had when we did Perkins. And then just I think the other comments with respect to the curb cut we've addressed. And since we did submit the site plan application and also the application for both parcel 2A, 2B and the admin building, we have met with Shannon Cohen from Sanitary. We've also met with Archie Trainer from Water. There was a little bit of confusion at the city because they were lacking some as-built when the park was built by DCAM. And I'll take off my glass so I can now see something. And the as-built, unfortunately, had never been submitted to the City of Lowell. We found them 3 weeks ago, so they have been submitted. At this point, we will send all of the sanitary out the back on parcel 2A. There is an existing, it probably would be easy if I walk up to the screen, because it's small. You can't hear me, just call.
Yeah, if you want to take one of those mics and push it with the green light, see the green light at the bottom? And that will amplify Mr. Walsh, okay? Thank you. Yeah. If that green light's on, it should be, yeah.
There actually is, when DCAM went back to construct this park, they left a stub here, they left a stub here, there's a new manhole here, there's a second manhole, you see the notes, manhole 1, manhole 2, and then it all flows this direction. So our intent is we will be able to connect this building, and all these buildings in through these stops. It will all flow this direction. The as-built conditions weren't known until about 3 weeks ago. And then we had initially proposed connecting this building, the new construction, and the commercial to the existing line. As we did some further investigation, we found it's 28 feet down, so we won't be doing that. And then the Shannon Cohen had mentioned just to be able to put an invert into manhole number 2, which is fine. That's pretty standard. This line from here to here was actually built on property belonging to parcel 2A. So we will take ownership for the maintenance and operation of manhole 1, manhole 2, and then Shannon said the city will pick up from manhole 2 going north and then east. And we'll go back and change over the covers so they will no longer say the City of Lowell. And he said that was fine with this. Same thing with the water. There is actually ample water out here. We will connect both. There'll be one line for the domestic water. There will be a second line to feed the fire protection. We will be able to feed all the buildings from these 2 connections. We have actually worked out a scheme with Archie Trainer. For this building here, this is pretty straightforward. They did leave a stub for domestic water and fire protection out here to the east of the building. There is a manhole. This sanitary flows to the east and then to the north. Hub, hosiery, McQuaid are both tied into this line. The end of the line is a manhole here. It's a shallow manhole. And Shannon Cohen said fine to come out and drop into the manhole. And then on stormwater, with respect to being able to improve the condition, as you may or may not know, the canal used to continue here. It was all filled in some point in the 50s with all concrete, which is all broken up. We will tear out the concrete, put in a pervious material here. We have also taken down this old annex, this wooden structure. So this back here will be actually pervious material. New construction here. We'll tie a roof leader into a drain system. This will have roof leaders, and it'll go into a leaching sump with an overflow into the canal. So even without the roof leaders, we'd be almost at a net zero in surface water.
And this is the same concept we use for going into a leaching basin to an overflow that we also use for the garage. And I think that actually addresses all the comments from actually DPW. Everything else is actually pretty much actually fundamental. I think that addressed all the comments. Any questions?
I think we're checking. I know you covered all the drainage. I think there was some other things in regards to the sidewalks on page 3 of her most recent memo, the 19th. Can you just touch on those? Do you have Mr. Mayo's letter from March 19th?
We actually will have a sidewalk to the north of actually Perkins, a two-way, and then there'll be a small sidewalk which will add to the south along Perkins Street. And the sidewalk extends a little bit beyond which is hub hosiery. We'll go back and connect those. There is a handicap ramp right now to the south on Perkins. We will have to add a handicap ramp a bit to the west, and then we will coordinate as Perkins Street comes around to the west and then heads to the north down Lawrence Drive. We will be able to, there is a handicap ramp on the west side of that bend, and then we'll have to go back and coordinate where they put the handicap ramp with the new construction by UMass Lowell.
Anybody else have any questions of Mr. Walsh while we have him at the microphone in regards to some of the engineering from the engineer? If not, we can ask questions later.
I think it's fair to say that every item on the engineer's memo, you're okay with. There's
Yes, we
nothing
are,
on here
sir.
that's an issue.
Thank you. Anyone else on behalf of the applicant, Mr. Flood? Okay. At this point in time, we'll turn it over to the public. What we then do, usually in the past, we always heard the for and against. After going to a few trainings, they educated us that we could hear from all people at once. We don't have to put them in the for or against. So basically, we can take public comment from everybody, and they can speak whether they're, instead of put on the record whether they're for or against, they can just address their comments. So at this point in time, if anybody would like to speak in regards to either the projects on 39 or 65 Perkins Street or 1 Perkins Street, could you, anybody wants to speak or make any comments, feel free to come to the microphone, give us your name and address, and whatever concerns or questions you may have. So at this point in time, anybody has any questions, comments? Then after anybody from the public speaks, we'll turn it over to the board. After the board makes any questions or comments, then the public hearing would be closed and the board would make their decision. So anybody would like to speak in regards to this project? Yes, just come to the microphone, give us your name and address, and any questions, concerns you may have. Thank you.
Hi, Marriott St. Cyr. I'm at 35 River Walkway, Unit 307. And my question was on, and I forget the addresses, but the, from River Walkway and Perkins Street, that development there, that, to my understanding, is historical area. And if Mr. Walsh could speak again about the exterior, that it won't be brick, and I thought that was historical and it had to be, if he could speak to that.
Sure, we could have them make a question on that. This
Okay.
gentleman could prove that, just,
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
just to follow up a little bit on that, ma'am.
Yeah.
What happens is on our planning board, we're required to have one of our members be a member of the historic board. That would be Mr. Lockhart, so he gets to look at it twice. So any comments that we have tonight, they will be addressed when it goes before the historic board. I think, as indicated, there may be a date that is on their agenda. So we'll let the engineer answer that question, and then a lot of times, it sounded like one of the questions, what he said in the presentation, was more to work with the historic board, whatever they're requesting. So we have the benefit of having the board member, so when they look at it again, they know it takes place tonight's meeting, then they know it takes place at the next meeting. Hopefully, therefore, we have consistency throughout the project, and people understand what it's going to look like when they're finished. So I'll let the I believe it was Barry indicate what the architectural was after he spoke with the historic board.
Okay, thank you.
Hopefully they'll answer some of your concerns.
Thank you. Sorry, my hand's
No,
not
take
writing
your
as
time.
fast as.
Take your time. What I was referring to, that the materials would not be brick, pertains to the new construction along Perkins Street. We have had preliminary meetings with representatives of the Historic Board, and they have asked us for those pieces that are newly built, that in massing, meaning the shape of the buildings, will be similar to the existing structures on the north side facing Lawrence Drive. But they asked us not to use brick because it is then too similar and looks too much like historic buildings, and these are brand-new buildings, and they want that it is clear what is new and what is not. Simple as that.
Do you have an idea what you might be using, so they have some idea what it might look like?
We're considering a couple of options, and it will come down to cost, as usual. Possibly a metal panel system, could be flat or corrugated, textured, or it could be an EFIS system, which it's like a stucco, synthetic stucco system, probably. It's possibly wood, but hopefully not that direction. Does that help?
Just so, if I could follow up on that.
Yeah.
Mr. Okay, go ahead.
At the Historic Board hearing,
Mm-hmm.
I believe on the 9th, we're getting an
Yes.
informational session,
Yes.
and then the following month, we'll do the public hearing. At that hearing, we often get a much closer look at the materials, because we look at that type of
Right.
detail. And it would be at that meeting you could get a better feel for what that would look like. And based on our history, I mean, in places where we have specified other things than brick, they really turn out to look rather nice. So I think you'd be pleased, but that would be the place where you could see that probably.
It's very important to us that these buildings look very good, for all kinds of reasons. Okay. Thank you.
Just
I'm sure you still don't know what it's gonna look like, because we don't
No,
either.
you don't, you can't require. them to
Just
do it tonight.
so they'll know, Tom, there's going to be an informational presentation to the Historic Board next Monday, the 9th, and the public hearing will be May 14th. So if
Right.
you're interested, you can go to those meetings.
Yes, ma'am, just come to the microphone, state your name and address, please.
This may have been answered, but I wasn't clear about it. You want my name, is that right?
Just your name and address for the record, please.
Okay, Jacqueline Malone, 52 Lawrence Drive. I have a selfish question. I'm interested in parking. And I entertain a lot, and therefore I use that parking space on Lawrence Drive. I know that the parking garage is going to have some extra spaces. Are those, how are those going to be handled? Are they going to be rented, or are they going to be something that someone can come in on an ad hoc basis and put $1 or $5 in the parking meter and park in the parking garage? How's that going to be handled for both the residents of Lawrence Drive and also Riverway, and as well as their guests?
Thank you.
It was, again, with actually mirror development in One Perkins. So we're the folks that developed Perkins Place, everything. The garage currently, right now, operates on pass card only. It's just too difficult where most of the people using the garage actually are residents in actually Perkins Place and the lofts. So to also go back and add the daily function, it was very expensive. We didn't have a lot of actually daily parkers. And I said, we right now have capacity of extra spaces any given month, anywhere from 70 to
100 extra spaces we aren't using. Even though by zoning, we'll have to see how this leases up. What we typically see, I've done actually a lot of urban development of multifamily in my career. We typically see 1.2 to 1.3 spaces per unit, and that's what we're seeing at Perkins. And for all intent and purposes, Perkins is filled up. We'll have to see how many extra space do we have beyond what we have in the surface. But no, we have been willing to work with the Renaissance, with the Rob McCullum, and Amy Stevens prior to that. So we have made spaces available on a month-to-month basis. It's a little bit more difficult just how the garage operates to go on an hourly basis. But if you have a constant need, if I can sit down with you, or my management team can sit down with you, we just need to see how this leases up and how many spaces get taken. But if we do have spaces that are available and you do have a need, we're more than willing to work with you folks. If that answers your question?
Yes, could I ask a further?
You sure can, yeah, absolutely.
Suppose I bought,
Please.
suppose I bought a ticket that would say be for $40, and then my guests could come in and use that ticket as they needed it? Is that a possibility?
It probably would be a pass card, and then we do have the ability. Yeah. That would, because everything right now runs with a pass card, a swipe card, which is tied back to computer. Top of my head, I don't know the software that well, but I'm sure we can work something out with you. Okay?
Anyone else has any comments or anything like to add? Okay. Anybody else like to speak in regards to the project? Okay, before I turn it over to the board members, Craig from DPD, is there anything outstanding? I know we've had several memos. I know the applicant, we tried to have him go through list by list, and well as from the city engineer. Anything that we've overlooked that you want to add at this point in time, or do you think you've given us enough handouts to keep us busy looking through for the rest of the meeting?
Yeah, not at this point in time. Again, my most recent comment memo was addressed by Attorney Flood, but I'm more than willing to provide any additional feedback the board so desires in the coming review.
Okay, thank you. So at this point in time, I'll turn it over. Any questions or comments any of the board members may have?
I have.
I'll start with Mr. Lockhart, if you don't mind.
Your surface parking is chopped up a little bit, and I'm wondering if you couldn't step us through where those spots are and the quantities and,
Showing the parking spots on the plan.
on both sites, just to get some clarification as to where they are in a field.
Okay. Well, is this visible? Can you see this on the screen?
Better.
Okay. Lower right-hand plan is the admin building, and the surface parking is on top of the plan, north side of the building. On these plans, north is always up. So you can see the dumpsters on the left side of the building and the parking to the right. Can everybody see that?
Do you want to point to it, Rich?
Yeah, if you could point to it, it would be helpful, if you had a light or something.
Bottom right, Jim.
Now, where are we there?
That's the admin building.
Okay, all right. So right in the back of it, yeah, all right. Okay.
The bottom building is 65 Perkins, and there is no surface parking up against the building. That building is just to the right of the upper plan. Jim, can you point out where that would attach? The upper plan to the right. No, I'm talking about just to adjacent, the overall site plan. Okay.
All right, I'm telling you, you can't. Can we do this one?
Watch the wire, Ed.
Parking for this is what we call actually parking 2B, or is it also known as 65 parking street.
Yeah.
So there is no parking, this is 6,000 square feet.
And just turn that mic on for you, please, so we pick it up, people at home. Okay, thanks. No problem.
Okay. We on? All right.
Go ahead, pick up where you left off, right there. Yeah, talk to that
And
building.
this right here is Lawrence Drive. This is heading to the east, north. Renaissance is up here. So as Barry Gannick had said, there is no parking because there's really not much land with this. So what the intent was, by zoning, we needed 12 spaces for the six units. Those spaces would be located. The dumpsters and with those, we put the primary 6 spaces for each unit here. So this is hub hosiery. This is actually parcel 2A. So these spaces in through here. And then the balance of the other 6 spaces, if needed, it would be across the street in the parking garage. The parking for the admin building, so the primary, we originally had
Can I just
6
interrupt you for 1 second? How far away are those spaces from the building?
From this building here.
Well, you just said the building here that doesn't have
This
any
buil-
parking
this
up
building
against
here,
it. You said that you're using 12 spaces up on that.
Yes, from here to here is about 30 feet.
Okay,
It's that close.
okay.
And, just what we have seen between this project here and other projects I've done, they'll probably only use about 8 or 9 spaces, even though by zoning we'll need 12, but we'll probably use 8 or 9 spaces. So the primary spaces will be here, and then the balance of the spaces will be over and through here. And we can control this flow by actually parking stickers and it also controls within the car. The parking for this development, the balance of it will be here, plus we also have parking through here. Any overflow that's required will be just across the street here. Does that help, sir?
Yeah, it does, still. So in summary, you need, I heard somebody say 35 total spaces.
Uh,
Uh,
I
can
think
you
by
just
zoning,
summarize the
it's
whole
about
site?
80 some odd spaces, 75 to 80 spaces. And we,
It's not 35.
yes.
That's why we have a letter from Chuck Khan that shows it for the bill.
Okay.
And we right now have capacity at the Perkins Ames facility anywhere between 80 to 100 spaces per month. And the lofts at Perkins Place, for all intent purposes, is fully occupied.
Okay, I just had a couple more things on the department comments that we received back. Our traffic engineer, this is, I guess dated Friday, March 9th. Traffic engineer had some comments about building 2A6. Recall that? I can read his comments there if that would be helpful.
If I may, Mr. Lockhart, I can actually read his writing if it would be helpful. The traffic,
He says, depending on the use of building 2.4, 2A6 at the corner of Perkins Street and Riverwalk Way, it could generate a significant volume of vehicular traffic. Direction and use of access roadways and driveways will need to be made clear among the various owners, I think, is what it says. I mean, you don't have any issue working with him and
No.
making sure that gets covered, I'm sure.
I'm glad you could read that. I couldn't read the bottom of it.
Yeah, it's a little difficult.
But, no, we'd be glad to work with them. And like I said, it's only 3,400 square feet. So there shouldn't be that much commercial use there.
Right. And the solid waste recycling group had some comments.
We put the dumpsters, we didn't have dumpsters in the first plan. I think that's what they were
Right,
talking about.
that's basically what this
Yeah.
is about, I guess. As well as the health department, the same thing. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lockhart, any other board members? Mr. Fischett?
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, it will be an improvement to see this final stage completed of the of the development. I just have a couple questions regarding the parking. I went up to that site on a couple of occasions, and I have to say, and I know there was construction going on across the street. I don't even know if people were parking along Lawrence Drive, but I have to say, most of those parking spots were taken, and that was on a Sunday morning. So I'm just curious if you have assigned parking, if it's first come, first serve. It appeared to be some openings in the other parts of the lot, but I can tell you, and I don't know if it was for convenience, especially if the construction workers, across the street, they were just parking on that Lawrence Drive. I think I saw maybe 4 open spots.
Those people are probably in the condominiums. There was a license agreement to allow them to use that, but it's a terminable license agreement, and a notice of termination has been issued as of April 30th. They're not supposed to use those anymore. I mean, we still work with them to allow them to use it during construction, but those would be the people that were using those spaces.
So, and then, if I understand this correctly, there's adequate parking within that site to accommodate those vehicles parking elsewhere on that site, or just so I can understand,
I'm confused with your question. Those parking spaces go with this site. Since the site was not being used, I guess there's some additional parking needed by the residents of the condominium. A license agreement was entered between the condominium association and Riverfront. Matt Middlestad's here. That's a terminable license agreement, and notice has been given to terminate that once we get started with this project. Okay. So those spaces go with this lot, but they were able to use those. And if you want to hear from Matt, he can explain it.
just so I can understand, so then the people that are parking there now, where are they going to go? Wherever?
They could probably go to the city lot, or if we have additional space, they can rent spaces from us in our garage.
In which condo development are they from then, just so I understand? I'm sorry.
They're from the condominium, Riverfront.
Riverfront.
Renaissance in the river.
Renaissance.
Okay.
See, a variance was granted to that development in 2003 for 1 space per unit. So they're shot. So they've been using those spaces.
They've been using those spaces. So as I understand it, then there is not adequate, if I'm looking at the whole location as a whole, I'm just trying to, again, under a special permit, the conditions of a special permit as well is, how does the project address traffic flow, safety, including parking and loading? Does the project provide adequate parking for visitors? Will the project impact an area with significant on-street parking demand? Will the project require loss of on-street parking and parking for driveway curb cuts? In the context of parking of the site as a whole, I'm just trying to understand what the expectation is of those residents that are actually parking there right now. Are they eligible for the placard cards, for the pass cards for
In
the
the garage, yes.
garage?
Ed has had conversations with representatives of the condominium association, and they are willing to work with them. And I think Adam Becky knows about that. We work through Adam Becky's office too. So yes, we're going to work with them to provide spaces in there because there are spaces available.
Do we know how many spaces they will need?
No, I don't know at this point.
Do we have any idea when we will know that?
That's the condominium association. I have no idea how many people use those.
Shed some light on that.
Yeah, maybe she can answer it. I don't know.
I can't give you a definite answer, but there are 151 units in the Renaissance on the river. Most of us have deeded parking for 1 car. However, many of the people in the condominium are couples, and therefore they have 2 cars. And as I said, I'm concerned about visitor parking.
I don't know how many use them, Jerry. I don't.
Heated parking, I mean, that's the sale on the plan.
I'm just having a hard time, again, from a planning perspective, looking at the site as a whole. the effects that that will have on that particular area for parking.
But I think our site has sufficient parking, especially with the letter from the city.
Right.
I mean, we conform with the zoning. They are free to go to the city of Lowell too.
Right. I don't have any further comments at the moment, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fischett. Mr. Gentleman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I agree with my colleagues that this is a project we want to see happen because we want to see this mill to be developed in this fashion. I too have the same concern about parking. And it is very piecemeal, so I can empathize with Mr. Lockhart in trying to follow the squares here because you got sort of parking all over the place that you're using to meet the requirements. And I was doing some math here, which may be wrong, while we were talking, and I think I calculated that total you need 83 spaces, including the residential units and the retail usage. Does that sound about right?
I think it's a little more, but.
A little more? Okay, so I gave you a couple. That depends heavily, though, on how the retail space is used. Because different retail uses have different parking requirements. And, if you take a straight retail business, retail operation, that's relatively low parking requirements. But as you move up, into service, restaurant, or anything like that, the requirements get greater. Do you have any indication of how you intend to use that retail space?
At this point, I don't think he has any tenants. He was talking about a bank, right?
Mr. Jenner?
Yes.
Yeah, we've actually been in close discussion with UMass Lowell, and the intent is probably away from a restaurant retail use, because given the amount of, at one point we were looking at a small food mart. I mean, we want to do a mixed use out there. That was always the intent. We did actually scale. I mean, from an FAR standpoint, we're leaving a lot of FAR on the table. But we scaled back the amount of retail, and we're looking at commercial retail, maybe some banking, because there's also a deficiency of banking. But there's going to be such a strong food, if you want to call it more of a restaurant type use at the university, that we didn't want the two uses to compete with each other. So it'll be a soft retail, maybe a specialty beer and wine, some specialty foods, and then more of a banking function. So we wanted to go back and complement what's happening with the dormitories,
Okay.
if that helps.
Yeah, that does.
Okay.
But it's still, what it says to me is that, if we use my number, 83 spaces, that may be a little on the low end because, based on what kind of service business goes in there, the parking requirements could increase. Now, if continuing with my faulty math, I calculated 53 spaces that were being allocated. Looks like 15 of them are ground spaces, and you're along the mill and along the, in the various ground spaces that you have. And the other 38 of them were in the garage. Am I right about that? About 38 spaces you're counting on in the garage?
35 we needed, but let me check my figures.
Yeah, and by the way, I'm
Close, we're right
coupling
there.
coupling both projects together here. in the
We're
calculation.
right there. We're maybe a couple apart, but
So roughly we're looking at about 38 spaces required in the garage. Now, earlier, Mr. Walsh, you were saying that you're planning on the Perkins Ames garage for these 38 spaces, and you're using about 240 of 370, so you think you have plenty of spaces left, but you've committed, 360 of those spaces are committed? Is that right?
The spaces actually are not committed on a per space basis. We have the capacity for 370. We have a license agreement that says we could park up to 370 or 368 spaces. 366. There's 183 units in Lofts Perkins Place. So the Perkins Ames lot was the primary parking. The lofts at Perkins Place is, for all intent and purposes, is completely filled.
Okay,
It's completely full, all two-bedroom, all one-bedroom, completely full. And of that development, we're only seeing 230 to 250 spaces month to month.
but in order to get approval for those lofts, you needed to have zoning required 360 spaces.
The zoning required that we actually would make available up to 366 spaces.
Okay,
And so we have made them available. The building is fully occupied. And so we can't get any more residents in Perkins Place. It's fully occupied.
so I get it, I
Yep.
get it, but
Yep,
you're
understood.
only using 240 spaces, but the zoning really required you to have 366. So if we start using those, or allocating those spaces to accommodate the zoning for the new structure, we're really kind of violating the zoning that we had put in place for the initial loft.
Well, not necessarily, because
Yeah, I think he's right.
we're short 35 to 38 spaces. And the zoning provides that we can go to the city lot to use them if
Yes.
we have to. We have a letter from Chuck Connie that says he'll provide those. I mean, I don't think you want us to sit and leave those spaces vacant if no one's using them.
True.
So that's why,
True.
they went and they
But
built this. They built this from private funds to accommodate these buildings. So, I mean, I think you'd want those to be used if
Yes,
possible.
absolutely.
But if there's a
one of my
problem-
concerns is that, sounds like a lot of the spaces that you're planning to use for this development are in use now, at least part of the time. Some of those vehicles might end up in the Perkins Ames lot, and so you don't have 240 anymore.
Well,
So I guess what I'm saying is that, I think you should, I would feel more comfortable if you actually reached out to the city and got commitment on the additional spaces that, rather than counting on the Perkins Ames lot, reach out to the city and get, allocated the spaces you need in the city lot.
We did.
Well,
Set up to 50. We don't need that many. We only need 35 because of what we have on site.
all right, but
Spaces go with our lot, not
this
with
just
the
says,
condo.
this just says that they're available.
Yeah.
if you wanna come lease
He'll make
them.
them available. I mean, that's,
So I guess I'm saying that I think you should lease them as part of the,
why would we lease them if we don't need them? If they're available when we need them, we'll lease them.
because I think that we're, in order to meet zoning, you need them. Because I feel like the 360 spaces that
Well,
are
I think-
allocated, let me finish, the 360 spaces that are allocated in the Perkins Ames lot for the lofts development should not be counted when we're trying to meet the zoning for this development.
I know what you're saying, Steve,
Okay.
but to me, it doesn't make any sense. If he needs them, he'll rent them. But we do have over 100 spaces
Yeah, but-
there
but
that
he-
aren't being used.
But I don't think they'll get rented, because I think that what will happen is we'll just end up with a bigger parking problem. I think you'll go ahead and use the ones in the Perkins Ames lot, and we'll end up having overspill of cars into that neighborhood.
But it's the same entity is going to develop here that owns the parking garage, okay? And they do have parking on site to satisfy part of their requirement. Then they went to the city and they said, Chuck, do you have spaces available if we need them? Yes. But if there's 100 spaces in that lot that can be used, why do we have to pay twice?
Because I feel like that we're going to end up with a lot of these cars that are using these spaces in the lot. So why is that hard to understand?
Why?
The spaces that are in use now, when you say, okay, we're allocating those to the new development, those cars are going to go in the lot, and you won't be 100 spaces
But
anymore.
we own that space, and we're going to use it for our development. I mean, they're not paying anything for it right now.
You are required to have 360 spaces to meet zoning.
Right,
You're
we do
required
have
to
that
have, let
on
me
the other
finish, let me
development.
finish. To meet zoning, you're
Mm-hmm.
required to have 360 spaces in the Perkins Ames lot
Right,
for the lofts.
right.
So that requirement hasn't changed. You still need to have those spaces allocated for the loft.
I
So
understand.
now, when we're building the new development, you need to have enough spaces allocated in total.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm saying. And I don't think we can count on those spaces in the Perkins Ames lot for this.
Well, we have so many spaces on site, plus we have a commitment from Chuck Connie.
Right,
that
you need,
says he'll
so I
rent it
think
if
you
we
need to
them.
go take Chuck Carney up on his offer.
What? Well, why should we pay in both lots if we don't need them? If the parking garage gets full, then of course we'll have to go rent them. And that's, I mean, we'll make that commitment, but we're gonna pay rent in this garage like everybody else for these units. So there's no sense paying it twice. They're vacant. I mean, I think someone should use them. They built it, the city didn't build it. They've improved that whole neighborhood, so,
Well,
as far as
can't argue
parking
with
is
that.
concerned.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, no further questions, okay? Attorney Claremont?
Thank you. Just a couple, if I could. I think it is a great idea for redevelopment of these properties, and it would certainly be nice to see. Just following up a little bit on the parking, it seems to me that, you know, for your project, you probably have sufficient. An issue has come up about Renaissance having only one space per unit. I know that's not your responsibility to take care of the people at Renaissance, but just out of curiosity, that garage, is there an opportunity to expand that garage and possibly use that for other purposes? In other words, could some of those spaces in a garage be rented to Renaissance, or is that just cost prohibitive?
They could go up. They could add additional floors to that garage.
Right,
Yeah, they could do that if they had to.
right. I'm just wondering if that's something that's a, you know, a money-making proposition or not.
What, Joe?
Is it a money-making proposition for a developer to do that, to rent spaces, or is that something you wouldn't consider?
I mean, right now, the garage actually is breaking even. That cost us $5.5 million to build, and it didn't qualify for tax credits, grants, nothing. And if we get, I mean, the more cars we put in there, it does help to go back and underwrite it. I know that you folks have also been actually privy to the finances of the new garage that was actually built down by Hamilton Canals, and as you know, it doesn't do well.
Yeah.
Garages are expensive. You know, I appreciate the comments, Mr. Generin, but no, the garage, we have vacant 100 spaces. So, and we will not see of the new development, even on the multifamily, we will not use all the spaces. I've been a developer for 28 years in urban areas. You never, ever will see that the required parking. But yeah, I mean, if there was a strong demand, Mr. Claremont, I think we'd look at it. So the garage was always designed to expand. But I mean, for right now, we'd have to have more demand than the 370 spaces that the garage can accommodate. But, you know, if we can accommodate the overflow from Renaissance, we've actually had a standing offer with the residents of Renaissance to park there for the garage has been open since just January of 2010. And I think we had just eight residents. And we've even offered the parking at the same rate that we actually charge our tenants.
And that was under a license agreement that I think you mentioned that
Correct, yeah.
is going to be ending. And how many spaces were licensed to Renaissance?
40? 35 to 40.
Okay.
So even if we parked all the overflow, assuming we used every space as required under zoning for this new development, and we took another 35 spaces from Renaissance, we would still have actually some capacity.
And you control the parking by way of stickers, or how is that done for the,
It's two things. We actually have a pass card,
for the garage?
which is actually all controlled with the computer, which we can program the computer. And then we also make sure that the stickers have that the cars have a placard as well. There are some people that have tried to bring the car in twice or use one pass card, but the software is actually smarter than that.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions at this time. I think most of the questions were concerned around parking. I know some of it had to do with the exterior of the building. I know we addressed that, and that'll be done at the historic board. And some of the questions I had with the comments, I believe were answered adequately by either Attorney Flood or Mr. Walsh, so.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Sure.
Just,
Go ahead, Mr. Fischel. Yeah.
on the comment Mr. Walsh made regarding the current agreement that was in place with the Renaissance for the 35 to 40 parking spaces, would that be something you would then be willing to negotiate for the parking garage?
Yes, yes. And we had that discussion with Adam Backey.
I know, but
Yes,
Counsel, we
would.
weren't privy to that conversation.
Yes,
So
we
we
would.
have a plan in front of us that the challenge is the way the parking is
Right.
divvied up. And quite frankly, this is where we get into piecemeal development of a particular site. And when you incorporate shared parking, and believe me, we get a lot of heat all the time on parking relative to developments. And this is a good example where the decisions we make here will have future implications on the future of use of that site and whether or not there's parking problems. And it's incumbent upon this body to make sure that we properly address it.
Yes, we will make a commitment to work with the Renaissance on the River Condominium Association.
Thank you.
Any other board members have any follow-up questions or concerns? Anything to be addressed?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to ask a question. Craig, what happens if a restaurant goes into this site and the parking requirements greatly go up? How is that handled?
Yeah, that's
Well, clearly, the use of the commercial site will dictate the parking requirement. Whatever that requirement is, the applicant will need to show that they can meet it with the spaces that are allocated through this process. Now, if they don't allocate a sufficient amount of parking either in the public garage as appropriate or in the spaces on site and in the private garage, then that use would be prohibited. But again, if there's opportunity to meet that use for the spaces as approved here in this public hearing process, it would be a by right use. If there were additional spaces, but they could be accommodated through additional leasing through, say, the public parking garage, then that would have to be included in an application for a change of use with the building department. And that would be a condition of the approval for that use at that site.
Okay. So let me ask you another question. So in this situation where, in order to meet the zoning for the lofts development, they had to allocate 366 spaces in the new garage. Now, there's 100 of them that are going unused, but still, they're required by zoning. And now we're coming with another project that attempts to basically double use those spaces. How do we handle that? I mean, is that something that is even legal?
It's a complicated answer, and again, I may defer to the attorneys on this board to get their feedback on this as well, but you're correct that with certain parking, you can't double count spaces. That said, I'm not certain on the exact language that was used as a part of the original development of the private parking garage. That may enable the reuse of some of those spaces, and it may not. I have to admit, I don't know it off the top of my head to be able to confirm that, in fact, that would be permissible in the way that this was the original Perkins upholstery building was permitted, or whether it would not be.
Mm-hmm. One other question for the applicant. You say that there's 100 spaces that are unused. You're basically using 240 of those spaces. Is that, how are you counting that? Is that average, peak?
That actually would be at peak, and also that's actually based on the number of actually pass cards that are held out right now.
Okay,
So
so
it
this-
would probably, at peak, it would be 240. The average would be actually less than that, sir.
Okay, so you have to access the garage with a pass card, and there's 240 pass cards that have been issued.
Yes. So you could go back and look at that as actually being a peak.
Okay.
And then I think you would also ask the question about, is this actually permissible by zoning and also by before we even actually went back and submitted our application, that I actually sat down with Adam Backey And so he was here when we did permit Perkins Place, and he's aware of the overflow, and he said that this would be sufficient. He's aware that what it cost us to build the garage. He's also aware that there are vacant spaces that are not being used. And then, if you do go back and look at the parking table, you know, that there are actually swing hours in there for mixed use, for commercial, residential, and then, you know, during the day, you know, that there are spaces not being used. So the garage is almost empty during the day.
Okay.
Okay?
Is there any capability for folks who live in the garage, who have probably two,
Everyone's living in the garage, right?
you know what I mean, living in the lofts, folks who are living in the lofts who have two passes, you know, for their two cars. Is there any way for them to get access for people who are visiting them?
I'm sorry?
So if I'm living in the lofts
Yes.
and I have some people visiting me, is there any way for my visitors to get access to the garage? Any kind of temporary?
What we actually do make
pass or
available are, I think there's either eight or 10 temporary passes, but they have to go down to the management office to go back and get access to those spaces.
Okay, all right, I see. Okay, that makes sense. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to see some kind of ruling, you know, legal ruling, maybe from the city attorney, about the issue of whether or not we can double count these spaces. Because if we've allocated 366 spaces in this garage to meet the zoning of the lofts, and now we're going back and double counting some of those spaces to meet the zoning requirements of the new development, I'd like to see some kind of a ruling that says that that is something we can do. So I don't know if, you know, continuance is in order to get that, but I'd like to see that from the city attorney before you know, we take action.
And this, we do have one ruling in our packet from Attorney Slagle, so I'm just trying to see if that covers that question.
That was regarding, Mr. Chairman, the approval of the Renaissance
Right.
on the
I
river.
just want to see if he had anything else to that.
That says that these spaces are available for our project.
Right.
Yeah, that's what it says.
On Lawrence
Yeah.
Street, yes, yes.
Okay, I'm just double check. I remember I read it before the meeting, but I didn't memorize it.
Mr. Chairman, if I could, it looks like, you know, the surface spaces are sufficient to cover all but about 29 cars, if I'm reading this correctly. Even if we considered that the garage was totally booked and we couldn't utilize the garage, there is an opportunity for those 29 to go into the city garage because they've shown that they have the space. That will probably not need to happen because of the 100 spaces that are available. But I think Mr. Gendron's point is well taken. If we've said, okay, all of the spaces in this garage are going to be committed to this project by way of zoning, and we're not going to recommit them to something else, even though there's 100 spaces available, I think because of the fact that we only need to locate 29 spaces, we don't need to consider the garage necessarily, because there is an opportunity to put them in the city garage
right.
if need be. So
It's actually,
I don't think we're necessarily double booking those spaces, even though they're all committed to that other project, because we don't necessarily need them for this project.
No, Plus, we're agreeable to make the vacant spaces, make available to the people in the Renaissance.
Yeah, I know, you know, realistically, they probably wouldn't be needed, but what Mr. Gendron is saying, I think his point is well taken. We've committed those to another project, so how can we recommit them? In my mind, we may be not recommitting them because we could take those 29 and put them in the city garage if we needed to.
Because I think what we've presented conforms to zoning with the parking in the city garage.
so I think that, so I can understand that point, but I think it's 35 spaces, and actually it's maybe slightly more than that, according to Mr. Walsh, that need to be committed within the garage when you take both projects together. And that's with the minimum retail usage. And even though we do have a letter that says there are 50 spaces available in the garage, we're really not making any kind of a commitment to use those spaces. So,
But they would if they
so
were
it says, it's not, those 50 spaces really can't be counted when figuring the zoning requirement. If they said, here, we're going to lease 35 spaces in the city garage to meet our requirement, then I would say, yeah, we've met our we met the requirement. Obviously, they don't want to go down and use spaces they don't need. All I'm looking for is to have, you know, so to meet the zoning requirement, they're suggesting that they can use 35 spaces in the garage, in the Perkins garage. So all I'm saying is those spaces have already been committed on another project. Do we have the right to go back and say, okay, we're going to recommit those spaces for this use?
Yeah, I think that if you stated in a decision that we, if necessary, we enter a lease with the city, that's not a problem, but, I mean, I think it's kind of defeating the purpose. They're available. You know, you're leaving a garage empty, 100 spaces empty, and
We're not looking to leave 100 spaces empty.
Well, I think
But
basic-
we're looking to meet the requirements, the zoning requirements of the city.
well, the
And-
space is
and-
available.
And I think the spaces are available now, but we don't know what it's going to be like in the future. And there's really no compelling event in the future for the owner to go ahead and lease additional spaces if they're not, if they don't have some, you know, if they're not forced to do so. So anyway, all I'm looking for is a legal decision that says, yeah, it's okay to double commit those spaces. And in the absence of that, I think you need to go out and actually acquire additional spaces in the city garage. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that we continue the decision for one meeting and request a legal decision from the law department saying that we can double commit those spaces to meet the requirements of the zoning.
I'd second that, Mr. Chairman.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I don't know if we'd be phrasing it as such a double commitment, but under the scenario here where there's space available but not leased, would it be appropriate or permissible to go ahead and approve it based upon that? I mean, if we needed those spaces, I think you would have to lease them, but if not, is it permissible to approve it? Not necessarily a double booking of that, but the availability of those spaces.
So I guess it's a twofold request. One is, can we count spaces in the Perkins garage that were already committed to another project to fulfill the requirements of this project? And if not, what level of commitment do we need from the developer to make sure that they use the city lot to meet that commitment? Whether it's a upfront lease or some type of a future lease, I don't know how that would work, but just an explanation from the city is how we would go about that.
Any further discussion? Now we have a motion to made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Chair votes yes. I think our next meeting is on a Thursday night, because 2 weeks from tonight, I believe, is the holiday.
What's the date, meeting?
It'll be the Thursday night, which is the,
I believe April 19th.
yeah, that sounds right. Thursday night, right? Right. Because that, Monday's the 16th, which is the holiday.
Yeah.
State tax returns are due on the 17th.
I won't be here. I'll send someone from my office. I'm going to be away too, so.
So it will be for April 19th, the meeting, I believe, right? It's a Thursday
I mean,
night.
it's for that purpose. Is the public hearing closed and just for this purpose?
I don't know that we've closed the public
Yeah, I don't
hearing
know.
in case additional information comes in regarding.
The question we discussed in the past was, what if we get a report from the solicitor and it generates more discussion? Mm-hmm. Then, do we allow that discussion to come in? If the public hearing is closed, then we're kind of tied by saying that we can't do further discussion on it.
Okay.
But I think as far as the
if-
board is concerned, that is the issue.
My question would be,
Yeah.
if we don't do it that meeting, we can put it off another date that you're more comfortable with, council, if you need more time as well. If that's acceptable to the board, I mean, I don't know how fast, Craig, the law department would turn around the decision anyways.
Let's be comfortable with it.
I mean, if they're looking for a 2-week date or the next meeting, whatever, if that give them more time instead of trying to do it. I mean, if you want to look at the matter and research as well yourself, if you want to go further, the next 2 meetings, if the maker of the motion would
Well,
amend that.
I'm going to be away that week, so what's the meeting after that, Craig?
It's the first Monday in May after
First
that. so
Monday
we
in May.
follow up.
7th, Monday, May 7th, I think.
May,
First Monday in May, is that all right?
I think Joe's checking, I think Joe has
okay?
the schedule with us. Right?
I think it's May 7th.
Joe has a copy of the schedule. I thought I had it in there, but I think I must have made a file. What do you got?
May
May
7th?
7th. May 7th. Mr. Gentleman, would that be appropriate if they put over May 7th instead of the April 19th, which is the Thursday?
If that's the wish of the applicant, yes.
Yeah, I'm away, so.
Okay, I think two things.
All right,
One,
thank you.
maybe we can get the opinion, obviously, it might give you a chance to look into the question as well that's been raised by the board.
Okay,
So if we change that to the May 7th meeting, is that acceptable to the maker? The
Yeah,
motion?
I mean, is it necessary for you to be here, Mr. Flood? I think
Well, if
this is
something
the only
comes up
outstanding
and-
issue.
Well, the question we're getting down to was, talking about closing the public hearing, and then, remember how we had discussion at our last meeting, about if we get a report from somebody, that could generate future discussion. So, maybe if we don't close the hearing tonight, we keep the public hearing open. I'm sure council won't be present to see where we go with it. So I think
I'd be more comfortable.
yeah.
Okay, I'm fine with another date.
So May 7th, that'd be acceptable to all parties? Okay, so the motion as amended is to continue the public hearing and request a letter from the law department to our May 7th Monday hearing. And that's, motions are made and seconded and favored by all parties. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Just give us a second to set up, and we'll be going on to the next matter, which will be the Walgreens site.
Nice sneak and get a drink of water.
Yeah, sure, help yourself, yeah.
Water? We won't charge you much.
I'm not gonna take it. I wouldn't do that. Boston tomorrow, I'll be back tomorrow. Let me see.
Okay, moving along, the next matter is a new business, which is administrative review of Walgreens at Middlesex Street and Wood Street. The planning board will review a request by Lowell Mammoth Development LLC to amend a previously approved site plan for commercial development along Middlesex Street and Wood Street and realignment of Edward Street. The proposed amendment includes relocation of the drive-through window, compactor, and utility areas located behind the store and drainage. May we hear the case from the applicant, please?
Mr. Chairman, James Flood, 549 Roger Street, representing Lowell Mammoth Development LLC. I was here a couple of weeks ago when we came in. I originally made the request, and we discussed the widening of Edward Street, but I told you that there was a meeting being held on site to discuss some of the issues, and I would come back tonight to present our plan. With me tonight is Michael Kaufman, who is with the developer, and also Ben Hartley, Jeff Dirk, who is our traffic engineer, and also Matt Smith from Bowler Engineering, who is our engineer. What we're asking is some minor changes to the site plan as a result of unforeseen conditions in the materials on the site, and also with a change on the floor plan of the inside of the pharmacy. So we're asking for a relocation of the drive-through, moving it 9 feet closer to Lakeview, to Middlesex Street. There's some minor changes in the back as far as the dumpster is concerned, and also some utility connections in the back, and a reduction in the grade of the site down a foot because of these materials. So I'm going to, you're going to go first, Jeff, or Matt? Matt Smith will explain the engineering issues.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Matt Smith. I'm a professional engineer and a principal with Bowler Engineering with offices in Southborough. I'm just going to run through briefly the proposed minor modifications to the site plan, and then I'll let Jeff discuss a little bit one change relative to the drive-through window shifting a bit. Do you have copies of the modified plans we've submitted? I have a couple boards that it might be easy enough to just pop those up to look
Yeah,
at
it's
them.
always easier for us to follow if you want to put up, I will get our plan.
Sure.
If that's easier for you?
Yeah.
I mean, can you see it?
These are older.
Yeah.
As mentioned, these changes to the plan are very minor in nature, and I think we could probably just do this holding them up. There are a couple of changes to the floor plan within the building that have some minor adjustments to the exterior of the building. And this is the revised plan that I have here, and the changes are on the rear of the facility. As we initially permitted this, there were actually 2 compactors in this back service area here. Now there's just 1. There were a couple of different enclosures for tote, which is basically baskets almost. Remember the old milk crates that you'd see behind the grocery stores? That's a tote. They have enclosures for those that modified slightly, but they're in the same area to the rear of the building. Some of the underground utility connections, if the water was coming in 5 feet off the wall here, it's now coming in 10 feet off the wall. So things that don't really change the function of the site. And then we had the drive-through window shifted along the wall 9 feet closer to the front of the store, or 9 feet further to the south. And we've been reviewing that with Eric Eby, the traffic engineer, and Jeff will speak to that a little bit more. But the islands and the function and the access are still similar to what was initially proposed. And then lastly, in doing the excavation on the site, they uncovered some unsuitable material out there that needed to be removed from the site. And we've actually adjusted the finished floor elevation of the building down by 1 foot on the site. So previously it had been proposed at elevation 105. We've lowered it to 104. We haven't had to change any of the drainage basins or facilities on the site. We did have to lower a couple of catch basin elevations. So ultimately, the entire drainage system still functions the same way, but just to lower that building a bit, we had to make those minor modifications. And that's really just because we discovered a lot of unsuitable material that was intended to be reused. We were trying to balance the site. Once that material left the site, the best way to handle it so we don't have to bring excessive amounts of new material in is just to drop that finished floor elevation by a foot. So that's that. Jeff has had some discussions with the traffic engineer relative to the drive-through shift. Should I pass this out? Yeah. And if I could approach the
Sure, absolutely.
board members? This is a blow-up of the site plan that we just put together today in response to Mr. Eby's comments.
Are you referring to the comment that we got on March 26th?
That's correct,
Okay.
yes.
So we'll let one of you address that? Okay, thank you. Once we have this plan in front of us, it might be, because I know he had a comment and we have a little diagram as well. Okay, gotcha.
Which is on here, right? Yeah. Excuse me.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Jeffrey Dirk with Vanessa and Associates, and we're the traffic engineers on the project. As the chairman had mentioned, I'll walk you through the refinements to the plan and the drawing that you have in front of you to address the comments from Mr. Eby. Now, as Matt had mentioned, realistically, what we're talking about in terms of the queuing, which is what I focused in my analysis, was a shift in the drive-through window of about 9 feet. Now, just for reference, when we're modeling cars, standard car dimension that we use is 20 feet, which accounts for variations in the sizes of the vehicles that may be visiting the site. When we do our queue analysis, what we do is we assume it's a 20-foot vehicle with a 5-foot gap between vehicles. That's the standard that we use when we're designing an intersection, basically off-site, and we want to size like a left turn lane or a right turn lane, because that dimension accounts for the fact that you've got trucks generally mixed in with the fleet. So if you use a 20-foot vehicle with a 5-foot gap, it accounts for the variation in terms of the types of vehicles you'd have. We did the same type of analysis for the site plan, but reality is a 20-foot dimension is probably sufficient for passenger and SUV type vehicles we have on the site. So I would view this, and I think Eric did as well, as it's over-designed in terms of the queuing, but it's prudent just to use that standard dimension because that's generally what traffic engineers are familiar with. So even though we've shifted the building only 9 feet, what that does is, as you look at the diagram, it pushes the queue of cars 9 feet further towards Middlesex Street. So what we had worked on with Eric was to look at providing some signs and mostly some pavement markings to make sure as someone's coming around the building, heading from Middlesex Street around towards Edward Street, that we're providing a little bit more guidance in terms of keeping vehicles on the right side of the road. And probably more importantly, if there was a condition where you did have 5 vehicles in queue as you're heading from Edward Street along to the front of the building, that we're defining the area where the queue should be, and so that as traffic is moving, it's not crossing over the line where the queue would be in place. So what you see on the plan is the addition of a double yellow center line. You also see pavement markings being added to delineate where the drive-through lane is. So again, we're creating that separation of traffic in the area. Another piece of information we provided was some vehicle queue observations for a pharmacy. And that was done at 2 sites in urban areas. And what we've shown in that is basically the number of vehicles going through the drive-through window. It's not a large volume. It ranges somewhere between 4 up to 15 vehicles over the course of an hour. So when you look at that type of volume and you look at what the queue that happens from that, it's generally somewhere between 1 and 2 vehicles. So even though we're required to design for 5 vehicles, reality is you're only going to have 1 to 2 vehicles in that lane. That's basically consistent with documentation that lots of different types of pharmacies, but specific to Walgreens, that's generally what you're going to see is on the high side in terms of queuing. And Mr. Eby has had a chance to review that. I think he's comfortable with the fact of putting these pavement markings in place and the reality of how many vehicles will be stacked in that lane, 1 to 2 vehicles, that the site can function safely with these modifications that you see in the drawing in front of you. Be happy to answer any questions you have now or later on in the presentation.
So when he said on the thing, the two-way traffic keep right sign should be posted at the curb extension near the drive-through.
That's correct. We've added that into the island area here.
Okay, that's right there. I was trying to pick that up, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Because that seemed important to him, I mean, okay.
Yes, we also, one of the other things about, you'll see his comment about Edward Street and someone wanting to get in the lane there, and he had suggested that we add an 8-inch solid white line. You can see that we actually have gone beyond that and have actually striped out what we're showing is kind of like a median area. So not only are we providing the solid white line, we've actually beefed that up a little bit more to really make it apparent that you shouldn't go into that lane there if there's vehicles in queue, and to proceed around the building and get into the drive-through lane.
Oh, I see. So that's raised up a little bit?
Actually, no, it's not raised up, but instead of it just, Eric had suggested just a solid 8-inch white line.
Yeah, I saw that on his plan
Yeah.
here that he submitted to us.
So what we have is an 8-inch solid white line, but we've also put longitudinal stripes that are 12 inches wide. So those are as wide as like what a crosswalk would should be. So we've defined it a little bit more than even what Eric had suggested there as
And
well.
where do you have those on site now? Right?
Right in this area here, right, so to the south of where the, to the
Oh,
south
okay.
of where the raised island is.
Oh, okay.
Again, it's really to draw attention even more so than the white line to say shouldn't be crossing that area.
Plus the white line's hard to see if there's a little snow on it.
Correct,
Yeah. I mean, which does happen, you think, where I
Right,
park, but.
right.
So you wanted something that explains a little bit more.
correct.
Right, okay. So those basically satisfy the comments that were addressed to us by Eric from March 26, correct? The two things that you referred to at this point?
Yes,
The
and we
8-inch line and the signage down below.
Correct, and we were fortunate enough to receive an email from Eric through DPD that basically said he reviewed it and he agrees with the changes and he feels the site will function safely with these modifications.
Mr. Dirk, could I just ask you, with the entire building moved forward 9 feet, is that, no, just the,
No, just the drive-through and
Just
to
the
accommodate
drive-through
some of the internal layout changes. So just the window moved, not the building.
just the window movement?
Just the
Okay, I just
window,
wanted to make
that's
sure I understood that. Okay,
Correct,
all right,
yes.
thank you.
Good question, yeah.
Craig, any comments or anything from DPD in regards to this? I know you've been involved in part of this discussion, or at least people in your staff that handed it off to you.
No, the fundamental changes as have been discussed are the drive-through change, some alterations to the rear of the building, some of the underground utility lines, and actually associated catch basins and manholes are slightly altered, in particular as they flow into the underground infiltration system. But the stormwater system, as indicated to us by the applicant, was designed for slight modifications such as these in general, so that there's some excess capacity. Those calculations have been provided to Lisa. We have not heard any comments back from her yet.
Thank you. Thank you. Any board members have any questions?
I have none.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr.
question.
Gentleman?
Yes, I was just looking at the note from our traffic engineer about the queue. And he was saying that, he continues to feel as though it'd be a better positioning if it were all along the back of the building. Is that something that was ever considered in this
Talked about that.
restructuring?
Sure we did.
Michael Kaufman from Lowell Mammoth Development. The configuration of the building, when the site was designed, that was certainly considered. But, once the site, we've already started construction. Once the site was approved by both the tenant as well as the town, a modification like that was not something that we have considered, nor can we consider, because Walgreens has been steadfast where the front door needs to be, and then everything else about the site is dictated by the front door and then the interior layout.
Yeah, I mean, we've been down this path before, right?
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
I think you guys all know my feelings on the development. I feel as though having the front door where it is makes that troublesome entrance and exit the main entrance and exit, and having the drive-through there continually, adds to that because it makes it feel like that's the back of the building. And, I think that's problematic. But primarily, I think that while it's only 9 feet, I think it's kind of a critical 9 feet, because what it does is it puts the fifth car in the queue off the end of the building, sticking out into the flow of traffic, right on top of the crosswalk. So, I think that that's a critical 9 feet, and I think that needs to be reconsidered. I wouldn't support this change to the site plan for that reason, because the city code says it needs to be a 5-car queue, regardless of what you've studied. I think we need to meet city code. Having that 5th car hanging off the end on top of the crosswalk in the flow of parking, in the flow of traffic, in my opinion, is not meeting the requirements of the city.
The vehicle, that 5th vehicle, even if I move the vehicle 9 feet, it's still going to be in the same place. All it does is it takes the rear end of that vehicle and moves it 9 feet closer. So in terms of its actual positioning, it still would be in generally the same place where the crosswalk is and coming around a corner.
Well, it'd be 9 feet forward, so
It'd be 9 feet forward.
9 feet more clearance for the cars that are driving around the building. So, I think it makes a big difference, in my opinion.
Any of the board members have any questions, comments, concerns?
Mr. Chairman, just relative to the drive-through, and I understand Mr. Genron's comments on this. I will say, looking at Eric's comments, and I know when we approved the drive-through at the Rite Aid in this particular neighborhood, I probably spent more time than I should have looking at that drive-through, just observing the results. And quite frankly, and I went at all different times and different hours, and I don't think I saw more than 2 cars queued up at any one time. So I certainly, while I certainly understand Mr. Genron's comments, when you look at the diagram here, it meets the 5 cars, but obviously that's a stretch, but I certainly would be comfortable with what's being presented. Thank you.
Okay. Any of the board members, any comments?
And the traffic configuration hasn't changed per se. In order to get into the queue, you have to come in off of Middlesex, correct? There's no opportunity to come in off of Edwards and get into that queue.
The intent is not to do that.
You gotta go, no, you can't, I guess.
Rich, any question?
No, I'm comfortable with the queue, I think. I think Steve brings up an important point, but I think this would work.
Attorney Flood, I think we probably need 2 votes on this, right? One, to make sure it's not a substantial major change, to bring it back for a public hearing. And then if we go along that it's a minor change, then we would need a vote for the approval of the addendum to the site plan. Am I correct? Okay. I'll make a motion that I believe this is a minor change to the plan and not a substantial major change to the plan. I'll make that motion.
I'll second the motion.
Motion made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
No.
Okay. So we have 4 in favor, 1 against for the minor change. And now we need a vote in regards to the amended site plan.
Make a motion to approve the amended site plan as presented.
Second that, Mr. Chairman.
Motion made and second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition?
No.
No. So that motion carries. So we have 4 in favor for the minor change and 1 against, 4 in favor and 1 against for the amendment to the site plan.
I know what you're talking. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was the one we put the bollards up on, right? That drive-through. And there's never anybody in it.
And I observed that.
And that was a tough terrain.
Edwards, Edwards, that's all. Craig, did you have any questions in regards to that last motion, in regards to, about, for the question for the legal department?
Did I manage to get the votes on that? I believe I did.
No, I mean, when Steve mentioned before how they wanted the question for the law department. Do you have any
Yeah,
questions?
I think I did get that. I have,
Yeah, if you have any questions, we can,
yeah, we can look after. I can also send that out to the board to make sure it's clear, so I can get that feedback.
okay. Yeah, I didn't know if you got the exact questions he was looking at and how the parking, was created for one site, how would that, is that parking duplicate on the other site?
Yeah, the fundamental nature is the question of, one, the garage, and then two, the public.
Yeah, 'cause I know when you
in that event.
refer them to the, I know when you speak to lawyers, they get into detail and nitpick every little thing you say.
To be as
Right,
clear
Joe?
as humanly possible, yes.
All depends on what side you, what side you're on that. So they might say, you know, so if you had a question on that, just be more than happy to try to indicate that to us before we go along, okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, having said that, if we can go back to the agenda again, I'd like to go back, if we could, to the approval of the minutes. I just have a couple of questions on,
Excuse me.
I'm just going back, if we can review the minutes, I just had a few comments. I think if I take them in order, December 5th. December 5th, I didn't have too much of a problem with, but when I was reading January 5th, on the third page under Harvard Street, we have the same language in there as we had under December 5th for the council motion regarding home-based business zoning requirements. So what we did is,
Duplicate, yeah.
you used that duplicate discussion under the Harvard Street for their plan.
So the minutes incorrectly reflect what was on the agenda?
It was on, but the same, if you just come up for a minute, I'll just show you what I mean.
Yeah, I can, yeah.
See what I mean? What happened is, under this one under Harvard Street, you used the same exact discussion that we did under the new business on that. So I think the only question I would have there is December 5th, I'd have no problem with. But when we did about the council motion regarding the home-based business zoning requirements, when you put that discussion in, when we had a continuation of 65 Harvard Street, you came down and said, no one spoke in favor, the discussion was the same, then the motion was by Mr. Gemwin and Claremont to send an official letter to DPD and the city council stating that the issue was discussed. So I don't think that's what we wanted for Harvard Street. Harvard Street, I believe, we approved the new layout. But so this here, I think, what happened was that was duplicate from your old minutes, and it just didn't come off, so it's, so I think,
Is the correct language under the Harvard Street, and that portion
Nothing
simply
under
needs to
Harvard
be
Street.
deleted? Okay.
yeah. So from there down would have to be, you know, it was Mr. Jenkins who came in and spoke, sold us the new plans. We had some discussion on the plan, and we accepted his plan as modified, I think it would have been, something to that language. So I think you get to the minutes here on the new sheet and just kept that on. So when I was reading it, I said, I thought I read that before. So, so I think, I didn't have a problem with the 5th, but when I read the, December 5th, I read January, so I think we just need clarification on the Harvard Street plan.
That was clearly an oversight on my part, I apologize.
No problem at all. I mean, I know when you're putting all these together over a period of time, and then I think the only thing I saw on February 6th, what was it, Joe? Was it that one? Or what page did
I
you
think
go?
also on January 5th, on the second page, at the bottom, under discussion, there's just a little glitch. It said, there's a sentence that's not finished, it just said stopped here,
Yeah.
probably where the tape stopped.
The board clarified that the detention basin was not altered, and then the word stopped here there?
Just the second page of January 5th at the bottom.
You know, actually, what I think has happened?
Actually, under 61 Bigelow Street, you've got testimony from the development of CTI, not CTI.
Oh, yeah.
Coalition for a Better Acre development on Gorham Street.
Yeah, actually, I think I know what happened here. I think that you were actually sent the draft rather than the finished version, because that language there, stopped here, is what I always write to myself when I'm trying to figure out where in the
okay.
deliberation that I had stopped rather than the tape. So clearly, you actually received the draft rather than the final minutes, so that should be rather
Okay.
easy
So
to correct.
Good.
We'll just make sure you get the final version.
So you want to make a motion that we will just revisit these minutes at the next meeting? If you have any questions, let us know.
At the pleasure of the board to approve those which are acceptable, or to continue all of them, whatever's easiest.
I think the 5th, December 5th, I think we're okay.
Okay.
As I can see, and then,
All right, why don't we do that then, okay? If everybody agrees December 5th, yeah, because you have, okay, December, yeah, because what they're saying on January 5th, when we have under Bigelow, we have the discussion, the same thing from CBA, right? So if we
It was
could,
just the 5th.
okay, so can we have a
February
motion to approve December 5th, 2011?
so moved.
Second.
Motion second, all in favor, say aye. Chair votes yes. Any opposition? Hearing none, those are approved. So we just need to clear up January 5th and February 6th, okay? So we approved December, and we will continue the minutes for the next meeting for January 5th and 6th. Is that agreeable to all parties? Okay. Motion made and second. Motion made by myself, second by Rich. All in favor, say aye. Okay.
Aye.
Getting back on the agenda, we had old business, we have none. Notices from abutting towns. I don't think we had anything in our packet to be concerned of, right? Placed on file if so moved. The ZBA notices, we received them tonight. Is this for tonight's meeting or the next meeting? Do you know the ones we got handed out tonight?
This is for next week.
So we don't need these tonight?
Okay.
Oh, for these are for 423, and we meet, okay, so that, okay, so we don't have anything that. Any general correspondences? I'll start with you, Craig. Anything particular?
No, not that come to mind
Next
immediately.
meeting we're due for that April 19th on a Thursday. Anything scheduled for that night, particularly, anything coming in?
I'm trying to think what we have scheduled coming up actually for the 19th.
All right, no problem. If you see something, you can tell it to us tentatively.
Yeah, that may be, we have a preliminary subdivision that was submitted for Trotting Park Road, I think I've discussed, and that may
Oh, yeah.
be on that, they actually think it was pushed out to the first day in May, so that's when we'll see that first meeting in May.
Okay. Any board members have any correspondences? Hearing none, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion made, second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Motion carries. We are adjourned. Good night. Thank you, everyone. So this is for our next meeting.